Picking out the correct desktop monitors can be a hard thing to do. And that's why I picked up 4 completely different desktop monitors by 4 different manufacturers at 4 different price points. That way we can take a look at these and see which one is right for you. Now, whenever we're talking about desktop monitors, we need to talk about placement because how you place these on your desk is going to affect the sound quality. Each and every one of these sounded the best when it was aimed at your ears or at ear level. So let's take a look at each one and see the placement options that we have. All right, for like a typical laptop setup, something like this would seem like a really good size. You got your subwoofer that goes on the bottom and you got these speakers that fit really close. When we open up the laptop, well, they're pretty good height, but the problem is they're not at ear level, and these sound really bad when they're not at ear level. So for something like this, you do want to get these up. So how do we get these up? There is a connector on the back where you could screw something in the wall and hang them from the wall. Otherwise, you're going to need something to tilt them, which it does not come with, or you're going to need some stands to stick them up high. Now, that's not really the biggest problem with the Hivi system. The biggest problem with the Hivi that I found out when I was placing it was this subwoofer. Now, this is a 2.1 system. Now, we need to think about where we're going to put our speakers. Where's our speaker wire going to go? Unfortunately, this speaker wire in the back is soldered into the cabinet, so we can't extend that. And that's because the connection on the back of the subwoofer also is a design that can't be disconnected. And so we can't change the length of the speaker wire. You're pretty much stuck with whatever length you have. You can't make it necessarily bigger or smaller without really doing some surgery on these. The other issue I had was there's no easy way to indicate which one's the left or right speaker. But even worse than that is the way that we control the volume on this Hivi 2.1 system is right here on the subwoofer. And so although this doesn't seem like it would take up much space, if you want to do the physical control on the knob, this has to be somewhere where you can actually reach and touch. So on your desk, that's going to take up a lot more space. I guess you could technically put it like on the side if you want to. The other issue that you have is if you want to adjust the subwoofer volume, once again, it's got a knob on the back to turn that up and down, meaning that you need this somewhere in a place where you can easily reach it. So that does take away a lot of the usability for a lot of people. Now, these are the Dayton Audio M6. These are actually the most expensive speakers that we have. And the good thing about them is their height. They're huge, though. They take up a lot of real estate. But because they're so tall, they're already almost at ear level. So when I lean back to my normal listening position, these are pretty much set up perfectly. I don't have to worry about getting stands. Now, if you had these on a desk that, didn't have desk space, you would obviously need some type of stands. There are no other mounting points on this. Now, there is a good thing about the Dayton Audio that I really like about placement option. They just use speaker wire. So you can run the speaker wire to either side. Now, that does come with some already really nice braided speaker wire, but you could get longer speaker wire if you needed it. Now, there's another thing that I really like about the Dayton Audio, and that's because sometimes you have your power in a spot that is on the left-hand side or the right-hand side, and so you need to think about how do I switch the speakers around or how do I run that power? Well, Dayton Audio is really smart in the fact that they have this switch right here, which you can actually switch it between your left and right speaker, meaning that either one can be left or right. You can run it whatever fits best for your desk setup. The edifiers are very similar to the Dayton Audio in the essence that they don't really have any way to hook them up except if you got some type of wedges or something to get them closer to ear height. Now, the good thing about the edifiers is they need very little change to get them really at ear level. And even as they sit, they don't really sound that bad, at least at my desk being pushed further back. One thing you do want to keep in mind, though, is these are rear ported. Now, because of the rear port, you don't want to get these too close to the wall. Now, these, again, do just use speaker wire, so you can cut speaker wire to connect these together, although it is going to be limited on the gauge of the speaker wire. You're going to need to use some thin gauge speaker wire for this to get this in the placement that you want. It does come with some, of course. Unfortunately, I haven't figured out an easy way to switch a left and right inputs, so these do tell you which one is going to be on the left and which one is going to be on the right. Now, one of the things that the edifiers do really well is they do have an auxiliary plug-in right here as well as a headphone input, so that way you don't have to worry about plugging up another set of headphones. Now these Atom Audios are very unique in the essence that you can switch the left and right speaker just like you can on the Dayton Audio, making it much easier to run the power where you need it to. These also do have low-end bass extension, but instead of using like a rear port, which makes it a little bit harder for placement option, these use these right here, which are passive radiators. Now these passive radiators, they use inverted surround, meaning the surround doesn't stick out of the speaker, but instead sticks in. Now that doesn't have any necessarily acoustical benefits, but it does help when we're placing the speaker. We don't have to worry about that surround getting in the way of our placement options. So that was a really smart design by Atom Audio. Now these also have the headphone input like the edifier, which is something I really do appreciate. But you'll notice that these are already set at an angle, and that's really nice because they're already pointing up at your ears, which is a huge benefit. That means you don't have to buy wedges like you might need to for something like the edifier or the hivi-swans. Now these are also the second most expensive. They come in about $100 cheaper than the Dayton Audio, but they have by far the best way of connecting anything. If you don't need that wedge, you can place them right on a speaker stand that you already have. They do also have rubber feet on the bottom, which does help protect your surfaces. But if you don't have a desk or speaker stands, you can also use like a wall mount or some other mount that does have your screw-in attachment right here at the bottom, making these by far the easiest to place. Now the only downside of the Atom Audio as far as placement option goes is going to be the cord that it comes with. It is going to be limited length, and so you would have to pick up a specialty cord to be able to make that a little bit longer if you need it. So when we're talking about placement options, for me, the Atom Audio is a clear winner as it can be used really with anything you already have and could be placed very easily if you don't have equipment already. Coming in second is going to be the Dayton Audio. They're already about the same height, and with them being sealed, much easier for correct placement. And coming in third is going to be the edifiers because, well, they have that rear port and they should really be raised just a little to get the best sound quality out of them. And coming in last is, of course, the hivi, and I don't have time to tell you all the issues that we've already talked about. Let's go ahead and talk about how we connect these to our equipment. The Atom Audio does have analog balanced inputs, as well as a USB DAC, which is what I did most of my testing with. Now it does not have an unbalanced RCA like some of you might be used to, although that USB DAC is a huge benefit. I would highly suggest using that if you can. Now the edifier, on the other hand, do have the TRS balanced inputs just like the Atom Audio, but they also include the unbalanced output, which would be like a RCA to 3.5 millimeter. Unfortunately, these ones do not have a USB DAC, which really isn't that surprising, especially when we take into account the price point that the edifiers are at. The Dayton Audio, on the other hand, does have quite a few different inputs. It does have a USB DAC. It does also have your unbalanced auxiliary in. Interestingly enough, it doesn't have a balanced input, although I think most people, if you're going to be using this with your computer, are going to be using that USB DAC anyway. Now, one of the interesting things that the Dayton Audio has is it also has an external subwoofer out. So if you wanted to use an external subwoofer with these, you could. However, when we talk about some bass response, I'm not sure that you're going to need it. Now with the hivi, we're going to be plugging everything up into the back of the subwoofer. It does have a digital coax in, a digital fiber optic in, does not have a DAC though. But does have RCA in as well for your analog input. I think most of you guys will probably be using analog input on this and of course the edifiers unless you already have a DAC that you're going to be using. Now when we do take a look at their on-axis measurement, which is going to be a anechoic measurement, which really doesn't help us necessarily. So we're going to just look at this very briefly. The Atom Audio is by far the most linear, and there are some reasons for that. Now after that, believe it or not, the next linear is probably going to be these Edifier MR3s, and these are actually the least expensive. So it's pretty impressive that they're the cheapest and the second most linear. And those actually have a really good linearity, although you're not going to get as much bass response out of these, and that is going to be the main weak point on these. Now in third place come, of course, the biggest speakers, which are the Dayton. And the reason why the Dayton are in third is because of this hump right here. And this part right here can be problematic, and we'll be talking about that in a minute. Now it has the second best bass response out of all of the speakers here, with really the Atom Audio actually coming in first for bass response, which is surprising because it's also really the smallest set of speakers on this table. And last but not least is, of course, the hivi. They are not linear at all. In fact, there is this huge dip in the mid-range, very high peaks, both on the mid-bass and on the high end. Yeah, there's not much to say about this. They're just not an audiophile type speaker. When you compare them to all the other ones, those ones might need a little bit more EQ to get the sound that you really prefer. So with the anechoic measurements in mind, the Atom Audio is going to come in first. The Edifier are actually going to come in second, which are the cheapest speakers, surprisingly enough. The Dayton Audio is going to come in third just because of that hump. And if you took care of that 100, 200 hertz hump, these would have probably come in second. And then finally, last would be the Hi-Fi. But in order to get good sound quality, you need to know what to change, or can you customize them at all? And with the Hi-Fi, you do have the option of changing the bass up and down. Now, if you do turn that bass up too much from the subwoofer, that subwoofer will start making noise and it will not sound that good. So that's pretty much the main adjustment that you have on the Hi-Fi 2.1 system. Interestingly enough, it has that separate subwoofer and it still doesn't get the best bass. Now the Dayton Audio, the Atom Audio, and of course the Edifier all have DSP built in, so there are some adjustments that you can make. So for example, the Dayton Audio comes with a remote control. Now this remote control does have a bass boost button, and by pressing that bass boost, you do get a lot more bass out of the speakers, and that can make these sound incredibly deep as far as the bass goes. However, there is a main issue. Because we already have that hump in the frequency response here, when you're watching, say, like a YouTube video or watching a movie, some of that bass and male voices will come through. And so I'm not a big fan of the bass boost. Now, the other issue with the Dayton Audio with the bass boost is the only way to turn that on and off is with the remote control. You also can't tell if it's on or off easily by just having the speakers on. So there are some issues because they are monitors, desktop monitors, and I don't really want to have to use a remote control. I mean, it's nice to have as a secondary volume control if I need it, but I definitely don't want to have it to turn the bass boost up and down. I also was surprised with the amount of DSP that they put on them that there are no DSP options, especially being that these are the most expensive ones out there. Now the Atom Audio are actually the ones that surprised me the most. So before we talk about the Atom Audio, let's talk about the Edifier. Because the Edifier do have a couple adjustments on here. If we take a look at the back of the Edifier, they do have both your bass and treble up. And this is what that looks like on a graph. So you do have a wide range to be able to turn that treble up and that bass up to get it to where you want, or turn it down for that matter. And that's a really nice option, but that's not the only DSP option you have. The Edifier also have an app that you can download. And on that app, you can make some more adjustments and fine tuning as well. Now, it's not going to be one of these apps that have like a 13 or 15 band EQ, but it does have some EQ adjustments, and it's a lot more than, well, the Hi-Fi or the Dayton Audio, which is surprising, especially in this price range. It's something that I think Edifier did really well. Now, listening to these as well, I was actually really impressed with the sound quality of these. They sound very good. In fact, the Dayton Audio and the Edifier, I love the sound of both of these. I think they both sound great. I wouldn't be disappointed with either one of them. Now, the Atom Audio are a little bit different. They're less about fine tuning and more about getting you the easiest way to make these speakers sound good. And I gotta say, they did a great job with these. These are the first speakers I've ever seen this on, and it actually works really well. And it was something that I measured and I was really impressed with. But if you take a look at it, it will ask you, is it on the stand? Is it near a wall? Is it in a corner? You just select which one it is, and it will adjust the bass for that application. Same with the desk. Are you on a desk? Are you on a small desk? Are you on a large desk? Select which one and it will tune the speaker for you. And the same with the room. Is the room treated, moderate, or untreated? And you just select whichever one that fits your environment, and then these speakers will get tuned or fine-tuned to that environment. And I gotta say, it makes setting up very easy, and it actually works, which is really impressive to me, especially at the price point of $300. I just wouldn't expect to see that on these. Now, last but not least is the listening impressions. What do I think of all these that they sound? The Hi-Fi are my least favorite. They're not ones that I personally would recommend anyone to necessarily purchase at that price point. Now the Edifier, on the other hand, which are the cheapest speakers, these ones probably surprised me the most as far as sound quality goes. They are extremely linear. They sound great. You can keep them on the desk. You don't necessarily have to point these up, although they do sound a little bit better if you got like a little wedge underneath there and pointed them up. Having said that, you can easily fine tune those with the treble and the bass, and those adjustments work really well. My son absolutely loves these. He uses these. The only thing to keep in mind, you're limited in your bass response. So if you want, better bass response, you're going to want some of the other speakers. But I do highly recommend these Edifiers. The best I've ever experienced at this price point for sure. Not even close. The Dayton Audio are the most expensive. They're $400 for a pair. I love the Dayton Audio. I've always loved Dayton Audio. I'm not ever going to say anything bad about the brand of Dayton Audio, but they are confusing to me because they sound really good. They really do. And the bass sounds deep. And something, when you get bass out of 6.5 inches versus like a 3-inch woofer or a 4-inch woofer, obviously it just sounds better near you, and I like that. And they did a great job DSPing that bass. Really powerful speakers up close. Now they did DSP this, so I wouldn't put these necessarily in a room to fill up a room. Of course, they're not designed for that anyway, and that's because they have limited the output. And all of these really have done that, minus maybe the Hivi. They didn't necessarily limit anything. So you can crank these things up, they sound great all the way through. But because of that hump, it's not my favorite. However, if you're willing to EQ that out, love these. Now, my favorite are the Atom Audio. I mean, they have, of course, the only one with an AMT tweeter, which is very fast and transient. This is actually their own AMT design. They sound phenomenal. I just am extremely impressed with how these sound. The bass, it's impressive that you get so much bass out of these with the passive radiators. And once again, they did the same thing as the Dayton Audio in the essence that they made sure that to limit the output so that you're not going to get distortion and you're going to protect that AMT tweeter, which is very important. So for me, if I'm going by sound quality, the Atom Audio was #1, with actually the Edifier probably #2, as long as you understand that you're not going to get deep bass out of it. If you try to match the bass of some of the bigger speakers and you turn that up, well, you're going to have some of the same issues that you're going to have with the Dayton Audio. The Dayton Audio, really I could put second or third for sound quality. I think in this particular case, I'm going to put them third, mainly because of the price difference. And the Edifier, which are in the $100 range, I think sound great. And the Hivi, if you haven't guessed it, are of course last. Now, I'm sure some of you guys disagree with me. So let me hear it in the comments section. All right, guys, this is Toid. I'm out.